My CEO husband once told me, "The only thing more dangerous than a hacker is a woman who knows how to think like one." He said it with admiration back then, watching me debug a system vulnerability that had stumped our entire team for 2 weeks. But he never imagined I'd be the one to bring his empire crashing down. Not with a weapon, not with a lawsuit, but with something far more devastating. The truth, dressed in lines of code only I could write. This isn't just a revenge story. It's the story of how underestimating me cost him everything. Before I continue narrating the story of Maddox, please consider giving this video a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. 3 years ago, Caleb and I were nothing. Two broke dreamers in a downtown apartment with peeling wallpaper and more student loan debt than furniture. He pitched ideas while I typed through the night, creating the framework that would become SynTech Shield, a cyber intelligence platform designed to protect Fortune 500 companies from the threats they didn't even know existed yet. Caleb had the charisma to charm investors and the swagger to sell our vision. I had the brains to build it, line by line, until the thing could practically think for itself. We were unstoppable until we weren't. The change came slowly, like a virus in the system, hard to detect until the damage was done. First, it was how Caleb started referring to my code as our innovation, even when he hadn't written a single function. Then came the meetings I was no longer invited to, the investor calls, where I was reduced to our lead engineer instead of co-founder. He said it was strategy. "They trust me more with the business stuff, babe," but I could feel the walls closing in. And when Julia Monroe walked into our office wearing a red blazer and 6-inch heels, I should have known the virus had mutated. Julia was sharp, no doubt about that. MBA from Wharton, previously poached from a fintech giant, and she could talk cybersecurity like she'd invented the damn internet. Caleb brought her on as a strategic advisor, which quickly morphed into VP of Operations, which then quietly became acting COO. She started sitting in on dev meetings, then leading them, even though she couldn't tell a backend from a firewall. I tried to stay focused, to believe this was just a phase, but then she moved into our orbit permanently and into Caleb's life in a way I could no longer deny. Late nights at the office became weekends at off-site strategy retreats. Our shared calendar mysteriously stopped syncing. Caleb's tone shifted from affectionate to professional, like I was just another employee, one who wasn't pulling her weight. He said I was too in the weeds, emotionally reactive, and resistant to leadership changes. All classic terms men use when they want to make a woman disappear without looking like the bad guy. What he didn't know was that I'd already started preparing my exit, not physically, but digitally. If he wanted to fire me, he'd be the one locked out of the house. 6 months before it all went down, I created something I called the Mirror Protocol. It was buried so deep in the code that no external audit could find it, an invisible reflection of the entire SynTech infrastructure, controlled only by me. Not a virus, not a bomb, just a quiet observer waiting for a signal. Every change they made, every update, every new system layer Julia pushed through without consulting me, it logged and archived into the mirror. And the moment they thought they didn't need me anymore, the mirror would activate. I didn't want to destroy SynTech, but I wasn't going to let them steal it. I should have seen the end coming the day Caleb started referring to Julia as a, quote, a visionary. We were in a board meeting and I had just presented a major update that would reduce data breach response times by 70%. Instead of acknowledging the breakthrough, he leaned back in his leather chair and said, "Julia's leadership really streamlined this rollout. She's reshaping how we think about innovation." I stared at him, heart pounding, fingers tightening on my pen. The slide behind me still had my initials in the lower corner, the timestamp of the commit for my GitHub. It didn't matter. The room had already moved on. That night, I went home alone. Caleb had a client dinner, which I later discovered was actually a wine and whispers date with Julia at the W Hotel. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop and logged into the mirror, watching their changes unfold in real time. They were beginning to override my authentication protocols, slowly phasing me out of access. I smiled to myself, because that meant the activation sequence was finally justified. They thought they were locking me out, but really, They were flipping every switch I'd designed. The final betrayal came 3 weeks later, during our quarterly all-hands meeting. Caleb stood in front of the company we'd built together, engineers, data scientists, analysts, and said, "Today marks a new chapter for Syntech Shield. We're evolving beyond our startup roots, and that means restructuring our leadership to reflect our growth." My blood turned to ice. Julia stood next to him, a small smirk on her lips. "Effective immediately," he said, "I'm naming Julia Monroe as co-CEO, and we'll be saying goodbye to one of our founding members who's decided to pursue other opportunities." The applause was forced, scattered, confused. I didn't stand. I didn't move. Caleb turned to me and offered a hand like we were parting friends instead of co-founders. "Thanks for everything, Al," he said. "We wish you the best." Julia didn't even look at me. And that's when I knew they thought they'd won. That they could erase me from my own creation. That I'd go quietly. I walked out of that room, my head high, holding my old laptop like a relic from a war they thought they'd won. What they didn't know was that the war had only just begun. I got into my car, opened the terminal, and typed a single command. Then I drove away from Syntech for what they assumed would be the last time. But I was already inside, and the mirror had opened its eyes. The command I typed was simple, elegant. One of those lines of code you dream about writing, the kind that does something massive but looks like nothing at all. It unlocked the mirror's next phase. Passive observation mode switched to active capture. Every password, every communication, every security protocol they thought they were upgrading in my absence began duplicating into my cloud vault. They hadn't just fired me. They'd handed me a front-row seat to their downfall. I wasn't going to stop them from failing. I was going to let them watch themselves fall, knowing I was the one who let gravity in. I spent the first week in silence, pretending to mourn the loss of my company. Friends sent me flowers and texts. "Sorry you're going through this. Let me know if you need anything." But I didn't need sympathy. I needed silence, time, and bandwidth. I drank coffee like water, wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row, and watched from behind my encrypted proxy as Syntech began showing cracks. Julia had initiated a platform overhaul, something she called Code Redesign 2.0, and Caleb, blinded by lust or ego or both, approved it without testing. They were essentially ripping out the foundation of a skyscraper and replacing it with Play-Doh. The first vulnerability appeared on day 8. A client's firewall failed to detect a phishing script embedded in a payment system. I saw it happen in real time. Their logs flagged it. Their alert system glitched, and the breach quietly slipped through. Julia marked it as non-critical, citing a known bug in the previous code, my code. She blamed me in internal emails, pretending the bug existed before her update. But I had receipts. The mirror recorded the entire platform state the night before I was fired. The logs showed no such flaw. It was hers. And it was spreading. Day 12 brought the second breach. This one was uglier. A vulnerability in Julia's authentication rewrite created an infinite session token loop. Hackers figured it out in 3 hours and used it to flood Syntech's beta environment with garbage requests. It took the new dev team 2 full days to isolate and shut it down, and even then, they misdiagnosed the source. Caleb told the board it was legacy code rearing its head. I laughed out loud in my apartment. Legacy code. That phrase, wielded like a knife, aimed to slice my name from the history of our creation. He'd weaponized my past brilliance as a scapegoat for their present incompetence. That night, I wrote a detailed report, timestamps, screenshots, code comparisons, even Slack transcripts, and uploaded it anonymously to our old investor portal. I knew Richard Price, our original angel investor, still had alerts on the board channel. Within hours, his assistant had opened the file. I watched his account scroll through each page, pausing the longest on the Slack message where Julia said, "L's code was built on intuition, not structure. That's why it's failing." I knew Richard would remember how that so-called intuition had saved him $5 million during the Flarecom breach last year. That message alone was a fire alarm. By week 3, murmurs started on Twitter. Anyone else getting weird lag with Syntax Portal? Why is two-factor down today? Small whispers at first, but enough that I created burner accounts to quietly amplify them. The public needed to know what was coming. Not because I wanted chaos, but because chaos was deserved. Caleb had spent the past year painting me as an emotional liability, someone too deep in the tech to see the big picture. What he didn't realize is that I had built the whole damn picture, while he was still figuring out how to tie his tie straight. On day 20, Julia sent a memo to the board. We're initiating a soft rebrand to position Syntech as a leadership-forward company. I nearly choked on my coffee. A soft rebrand? While the system was held together by duct tape and denial? They weren't fixing anything. They were renaming it and hoping people wouldn't notice. The memo also recommended purging all documentation tied to, quote, legacy leadership, including training videos, code walkthroughs, and internal wiki pages. Translation: they were erasing me. Officially, that was their biggest mistake, because that gave me permission to proceed to Phase 2 disruption. The Mirror didn't just watch, it documented, recorded every API call, every keystroke in their dev environment, every bug Julia and her team left unresolved. And on day 25, I turned it all into a 40-page dossier. I compiled it into a neat little PDF and sent it to 3 people: Richard Price, the SEC whistleblower inbox, and a prominent cybersecurity journalist known for exposing billion-dollar frauds. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. My fingerprints were all over the code, embedded in every function, every protocol, every algorithm. No one else on the planet could have built what I built. It was my DNA in digital form. Day 28, the story broke. Exclusive. Inside the collapse of Syntech. Did a leadership coup compromise security for vanity? The article went viral in under 6 hours. Quotes from former employees. Leaked documents. An analysis showing exactly how the new leadership's changes had destabilized the once reliable platform. Julia's name trended on Twitter for all the wrong reasons. Caleb released a statement that night blaming unauthorized sabotage and promised a full investigation. I smiled, because he had no idea the only person authorized to fix the problem was the one they'd thrown out the front door. I watched the stock tumble 17% overnight. Contracts were paused. Clients began demanding audits. And then came the call, an anonymous email with no subject line, no body, just an attachment. An HR termination letter dated 2 months ago, pre-signed by Caleb. It was for me. And it wasn't the version I received. This one had notes scrawled in Julia's handwriting. Make sure we revoke all access, especially mirror stuff. That confirmed it. They knew I'd built something beyond their reach. They just didn't know what or how to stop it. And now, they were out of time. On day 30, I activated Phase 3. Not destruction, exposure. A command that sent mirrored logs of every major flaw to Syntech's top 5 clients. I didn't alter a single byte, just showed them what was really happening behind the curtain. It was the equivalent of turning on the lights in a kitchen, infested with roaches. No more hiding. No more lies. The truth, in raw JSON logs and time-stamped breach reports. That afternoon, Caleb called me. I didn't answer right away. I let the phone buzz across my kitchen counter until the call dropped and his name disappeared from the screen. Then he tried again. And again. On the 4th attempt, I picked up, not out of kindness but curiosity. I wanted to hear how a man sounded when his empire started slipping between his fingers, especially one arrogant enough to believe I was the expendable part of our success. L. Caleb's voice cracked, the smooth CEO polish gone. We need to talk. Seems like you're talking just fine, I replied, keeping my tone cool. What's the emergency? Another legacy bug acting up? He paused. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the faint buzz of chatter behind him. Probably his office in chaos. You've made your point, he said finally. But there's a line, and you've crossed it. That made me laugh, sharp and bitter. Oh, now you care about lines. You mean like the one between professionalism and sleeping with your COO, or the one between co-founder and expendable liability? I'm not here to rehash the past, he snapped, then took a breath. Look, investors are spooked. Clients are walking. If we don't stop this spiral now, Syntech's done. And we both lose. I leaned against the counter, swirling my tea. You're already done. I just gave everyone a flashlight and let them see the cracks for themselves. You're sabotaging the company we built, he hissed. This isn't revenge. It's destruction. No, I said. It's exposure. And don't you dare call it our company after you tried to erase me from it. You lied to the board, you fabricated complaints, and you installed your mistress as co-CEO. You wanted Syntech to be yours? Congratulations, it's all yours now. Every flaw, every lawsuit, every breach. Another long silence. Then he whispered, "You're better than this." Funny, I said. I used to think so too, but turns out I'm exactly this good. I hung up without waiting for his reply. The adrenaline in my veins was electric. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about truth. And truth was undefeated when presented with undeniable evidence. I didn't have to destroy Syntech. I just had to step back and let the truth finish the job. The only question was how long it would take before everything they'd built on lies collapsed into digital ash. Day 31, the exodus began. 3 major clients, including Transglobe Finance, our biggest account, terminated their contract citing confidence erosion and security failures. Transglobe's PR statement was brutal. We entrusted Syntech with safeguarding our most sensitive infrastructure. Recent revelations have made continued partnership untenable. Caleb tried to spin it, claiming it was part of a larger restructuring strategy, but no one believed him. Julia didn't release a statement at all. She'd gone dark on social media, removed her LinkedIn title, and quietly deleted every post referencing Syntech. She knew the ship was sinking. Fast. Meanwhile, I was fielding calls. Richard Price reached out again. If you're considering a new venture, we'd like to be your first backers. I'm not ready, I told him. Not yet. But the offer lingered like a promise. People finally saw what I'd built, not because I waved a flag, but because, when everything fell apart, the pieces spelled out my name. And it turns out, when tech giants crumble, people start listening to the ones who warned them first. On day 33, a curious thing happened. Someone from within Syntech leaked a video. It was a screen recording of Julia berating a junior engineer over the breach, claiming his lack of initiative created the opening. But the metadata showed the incident occurred 3 days after her restructured codebase went live. The kid hadn't touched that system. His only mistake was raising a red flag too early and getting crushed for it. The video went viral. Hashtags followed. Hashtag Justice Forian. Hashtag Syntech Collapse. Hashtag Bring Bakel. The public had picked its side. That night, I received an encrypted email from Ryan himself. Hi L. Yee. You don't know me. I was just a back-end intern during the last dev cycle before you were let go. I saw what happened from the inside. What they did to you, what they did to the company. Your mirror protocol? It's genius. I hope someday you use that brilliance again. Just not for people like them. We're all rooting for you. I cried for the first time since the day they fired me. Not because I was sad, but because someone finally understood. I wasn't just writing code. I was writing legacy. Architecture meant to protect. People like Ryan were the future of tech, and they deserved better than to be casualties in corporate power games. I saved that email in a folder marked Proof I'm Not Crazy. It was growing steadily. By day 35, Syntech's internal dashboard showed a 40% system degradation across their critical services. Their patchwork fixes were unraveling. The new devs didn't understand the logic behind my original build. Julia's top-down rewrites had broken dependencies buried too deep to trace. The system didn't need sabotage. It was eating itself alive. Like I told Caleb once, you can't patch over bad design. You have to start over. He hadn't listened then. Now, it was too late. On day 36, the class action lawsuit hit the wire. Dozens of clients were banding together, claiming Syntec had misrepresented its platform stability and covered up known vulnerabilities. One of the exhibits? My anonymous dossier. Redacted, of course, but anyone in the industry could tell where the intel came from. Caleb's face was on every news outlet that afternoon, his expression tight, jaw clenched like he wanted to break something. I watched it live while eating leftover noodles in pajamas. Watching him unravel in HD was better than therapy. Then came the most satisfying moment yet. A statement from the board of directors. We acknowledge the critical role played by former co-founder Elle Maddox in the creation and development of Syntec Shield's foundational technology. Decisions made without her oversight led to significant technical failures and loss of client trust. We regret her departure and recognize her indispensable contributions. That was it. No apology, no flowers, but public acknowledgement. They couldn't erase me anymore. The world now knew whose name was etched into Syntec's bones. My name. On day 37, I woke up to a headline that felt like an out-of-body experience. The woman who warned them, Elle Maddox and the fall of Syntec. It was a long-form piece, 2,000 words in Tech Insider, detailing my contributions, the betrayal, and the silent unraveling that followed. They'd interviewed 3 former employees off the record, each confirming my code was what kept Syntec stable and that Julia's so-called modernization had effectively pulled the foundation out from under the building. The article didn't call me a whistleblower, it called me what I had been all along, the architect. That day, I turned off all my devices, no screens, no terminal, no network feeds. Just silence. I needed a moment to be human again, to breathe without digital noise. I went for a walk by the waterfront, the wind off the Puget Sound brisk against my skin, the sky heavy with that slate-gray Seattle mood. I watched seagulls dive, listened to the tide, and felt the world go on like it didn't care whether Syntec lived or died. And for the first time in months, I felt weightless. But peace doesn't last in a world on fire. By the time I got home, my voicemail was full: law firms, investors, tech magazines, even a Netflix producer. Everyone wanted a piece of the story now. One message stood out, a quiet, hesitant voice I hadn't heard in a long time. "Elle, it's Sam from the early days. I don't know if you remember me. I left Syntec before the Julia era, but I saw everything. I just wanted to say, you weren't wrong. You never were. If you're starting anything new, I want in." Sam had been our first hire, a quiet genius with a talent for clean code and loyal to a fault. Hearing from him was like finding an old photo in a drawer and realizing you still recognize the person in it. On day 38, I began sketching out ideas. Not a company. Not yet. But a system. A next-generation security platform that didn't just react to threats, but evolved with them. Syntec had been built to defend. This would be built to adapt. I called it Umbra, Latin for shadow, a nod to the Mirror Protocol, a promise that no one would ever be caught off guard again if I could help it. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. I wasn't building out of anger. I was building because I still believed people deserved protection. Meanwhile, Syntec continued its nosedive. Day 40, Julia officially resigned. The press release was sterile, filled with phrases like "pursuing new opportunities" and "grateful for the journey." But everyone knew. Her name was tainted now, her reputation scorched. She hadn't just failed. She'd been exposed as a fraud in an industry where frauds don't get second chances. She disappeared from the news cycle within a week, and last I heard, she was consulting for a boutique e-commerce firm in Arizona. A long way from Seattle. A long way from relevance. Caleb, however, wasn't so lucky. Day 43, the SEC filed a preliminary inquiry. Not for sabotage, that had no trail, but for financial misrepresentation. Someone had leaked the original board documents, the ones that showed how he'd manipulated voting rights to push me out. That wasn't just unethical, it was potentially illegal. The investors were furious. I saw leaked emails from Richard Price demanding answers, demanding a plan, demanding anything that didn't sound like panic in a suit. But that was all Caleb had left. Panic in a suit and a skeleton crew clinging to a dying ship. On day 45, he showed up at my door. I knew he would eventually. Pride only lasts so long when desperation starts knocking. I heard the knock before I saw him. 3 sharp taps, then a pause. I didn't answer immediately. I took a sip of coffee, glanced at the time. Then I opened the door. He looked like a man who'd run out of mirrors. Hair unkempt, tie loose, dark circles under his eyes. His posture sagged like the weight of failure had finally settled in his bones. "Elle," he said, "please, just let me talk." I didn't move, didn't invite him in, just leaned against the frame like the door itself was a barrier I was willing to maintain until I heard something worth my time. "You were right," he said, "about all of it." "That's not news," I replied. "I let her convince me, Julia, that you were holding the company back, that we needed fresh ideas." "No," I said. "You needed someone who didn't remind you that the success you flaunted came from someone else's sweat." His lips tightened, but he didn't deny it. "We're broke," he said finally. "The valuation's down to $1.3 million. Most of that's physical assets. The board's looking to sell what's left. Then sell it. They want to talk to you." "Why?" "Because your code is the only part of Syntech that's still valuable. The architecture still works. The mirror protocol, whatever you built into the bones, it's the only thing surviving. They think if you came back." I laughed. "You want me to fix the company you fired me from?" "No," he said quietly. "I want you to buy it." That stopped me. "You're kidding. The board will take pennies on the dollar if it means salvaging anything." I told them I'd ask. They wouldn't have approached you directly, not after what they did. "And what do you get out of this, Caleb?" I asked. "Redemption?" He looked away. "Just closure." I didn't give him an answer. Not then. But that night, I called Richard Price. He answered on the first ring. "I hear you might have a company for sale," I said. Silence. Then, "Are you serious?" "That depends. You still want to be my first backer?" By day 46, I had a formal offer drafted. Richard Price agreed to front the capital, with one condition. If I bought Syntech's remaining assets, I had to gut it completely. No lingering staff from the Julia era. No carryover systems from the corrupted build. No ghost of the previous regime allowed to haunt the rebirth. I agreed instantly. I wasn't buying a company. I was reclaiming the skeleton of my creation to resurrect it on my terms. The deal closed within 72 hours. The board, drained and desperate, didn't haggle. They were too eager to cut their losses, too exhausted from the fallout. The final acquisition price, $1.1 million. That included office equipment, hardware, trademarks, and the source code still tied to my original architecture. Everything Julia and Caleb added was already being deprecated, an unspoken admittance that their contributions were liabilities, not assets. I signed the documents in a sleek downtown law office with Richard seated beside me, smiling like a man who knew a phoenix when he saw one. Caleb wasn't present for the signing. He emailed that morning saying he didn't want to complicate the moment. I knew better. He couldn't bear to see me win. Not like this. But I didn't need his acknowledgement. Watching the board turn to me with gratitude, desperation, and something resembling respect was enough. I'd gone from being their silent scapegoat to the only person who could salvage the mess. It felt good. Not because of the power, but because of the proof. I was right to believe in myself. All along. By day 50, I returned to the Syntech office for the first time since my termination. It looked like a war zone. The lobby furniture was covered in dust. Old takeout containers littered the break room, and most of the whiteboards still had half-erased diagrams from emergency planning sessions that had clearly gone nowhere. Only 5 people remained on payroll, mostly low-level ops and IT staff too numb to care. I held a brief meeting, thanked them for their service, and issued severance checks with full benefits coverage through the next 2 months. Then I cleared the building. That afternoon, I took a sledgehammer to Julia's office wall. The glass, etched with her name in faux gold, shattered in one clean blow. I wasn't being dramatic. It was symbolic. That office had once belonged to me. I'd paced that floor, dreaming up algorithms that now protected banks across 3 continents, reclaiming that space wasn't enough. I needed to tear down every piece of her illusion. So I did. With every swing, I stripped away her narrative and made space for mine. By day 54, Umbra had a dedicated team of 6. Sam was the first to join, of course. Then Ryan, the intern-turned-whistleblower, who brought 2 of his classmates from MIT, both brilliant, both eager to work under someone who'd taken on the industry and won. We set up temporary desks in what used to be the marketing wing. No more titles like brand evangelist or visionary strategist, just developers, architects, engineers. We didn't care about logos or ad campaigns, we cared about code, about rebuilding something with integrity this time. The plan was simple. Umbra would not be marketed as a Syntech successor. It would be something entirely new, smarter, lighter, more agile. We would use the bones of my old codebase, strip away the garbage, and rebuild a platform that adapted to evolving threats in real time. Syntech had been reactive. Umbra would be predictive, adaptive, invisible until needed, like its namesake. No press releases, no flashy launch, just an invite-only beta for firms we trusted. The kind of companies who had seen through Caleb's charm and Julia's sheen. Day 60 came with a twist I didn't expect. An email from Caleb. Subject line, "Thank you." I almost deleted it unread. But something about its simplicity made me click. Inside, it was brief. No manipulation. No bargaining. Just 3 lines. L. A. Golu. You saved it. I didn't deserve it, but you saved it. For what it's worth, I hope you make something better. I didn't reply, not because I wasn't moved, but because I had already moved on. By day 75, Umbra launched its private beta. We onboarded 5 clients in a single week, each one from the original Syntech client list, each one who'd terminated their contracts post-collapse. They didn't care about branding or buzzwords. They wanted systems that worked, security they could rely on, and most of all, they wanted me. Every deployment came with my signature on the audit report, my promise. Not the company's, mine. One of the clients, Transglobe, sent a gift basket. Inside was a handwritten card. "We followed your story. We know who really built the walls that kept us safe. We're glad you're back." I pinned it to the bulletin board next to my monitor. Umbra grew fast. By day 90, we had 30 employees, a waiting list of clients, and a product stable enough to deploy at scale. We were profitable before we had a website. Word of mouth carried more weight than marketing ever could. Our code spoke louder than Caleb's suits or Julia's slogans. And the best part? It was mine. Every architecture diagram, every build script, every system heartbeat was something I understood with muscle memory. No hidden hands. No whispered lies. Just clean, elegant code and a team that trusted me. Then came the press. Tech Insider called it the Quiet Revolution. Wired ran a profile titled, "The Woman Who Burned Her Empire to Build a Better One." And Forbes simply labeled me the architect. The attention wasn't something I chased, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore either. I showed up to interviews with my hair in a bun, wearing jeans, no PR handler behind me. I told the truth. About the betrayal. About the rebuild. About why I still believed that security wasn't just about locking doors. It was about designing systems that deserved to be trusted. On day 100, the final confirmation came, an email from the SEC. The inquiry into Syntech was closed. No criminal charges filed, but the company's remains were formally dissolved. And with that, the name was dead. There would be no resurrection. Only Umbra. Only me. Day 101 started like any other. Black coffee, code review, and a 10-minute stand-up with my dev team. But something about that morning felt different, lighter. The air in the office buzzed with quiet energy, the kind of hum you feel when everyone's moving in the same direction. Umbra wasn't just growing. It was thriving. The The platform had surpassed every stress test we threw at it, detecting anomalies before they fully formed, adapting like a living organism trained to protect what mattered most. I stared at the dashboard, clean lines, 0 errors, threat response time under a second, and smiled. Sam poked his head into my office. "You see the update from TransGlobe?" "Just now. They hit a DDoS attempt and never even noticed." "Exactly. We flagged it, quarantined it, restructured the API access chain and rerouted the backup traffic, all automatically." I leaned back in my chair. "That's the dream, Sam. Invisible armor." He grinned. "You didn't build armor, you built instincts. Artificial intuition." That phrase stuck with me. Artificial intuition. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't a buzzword we could slap on a billboard. But it was real. It was the culmination of everything Syntech should have been and everything Umbra was becoming. I looked around the office, the once abandoned space now filled with chatter, with whiteboards scrawled in code, with people who believed in what we were doing. There was no fake corporate culture here, no ping-pong tables or cold brew taps meant to distract from toxic leadership. We didn't need gimmicks. We had purpose. On day 105, we got our first unsolicited acquisition offer, $15 million from a well-known tech conglomerate. The email was courteous, flattering even. They'd done their research, mentioned our growth, our retention rate, our platform's performance in independent testing. They offered me a 5-year CTO contract, full autonomy, even the option to rename the parent company's security division under the Umbra brand. It was everything most people would dream of. I closed the email after reading it once. I didn't need to think about it. On day 106, I replied with 2 words. Not interested. I wasn't building Umbra to sell it. I was building it to last. The acquisition offer made the rounds, though. Word got out. More offers came in, each higher than the last. Some were from companies that had publicly distanced themselves from Syntech after the collapse, now trying to quietly invest in the phoenix that rose from its ashes. One VC firm even sent a bottle of champagne with their term sheet. I gave it to our devs to pop after their next sprint review. Let them celebrate. I had no use for it. On day 110, I received an unexpected visitor. Emma, the old receptionist from Syntech, showed up at our front desk holding a box of muffins. I hadn't seen her since the day I was escorted out, when she'd looked at me with a mix of confusion and guilt. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, tears in her eyes. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't stand up for you." I led her into my office and poured us both some coffee. "You didn't owe me anything," I told her gently. "I did," she said. "We all did. We knew something was wrong. He had all the power. And now?" She looked around at the bright, bustling office. "Now it feels like someone got justice. For all of us." I offered her a job on the spot. Operations assistant. Full benefits. Flexible hours. Not because I felt sorry for her, but because I knew talent when I saw it. And because she had the rarest quality in tech, humility. She accepted the offer with a shaky smile and walked out holding her new company badge like it was a trophy. Maybe it was. Maybe Umbra wasn't just rebuilding systems. Maybe it was rebuilding people too. By day 120, the calls from journalists started again. Not about Syntech, not about the collapse, about me. They wanted profiles, keynote invitations, interviews about female leadership in tech. And while I appreciated the interest, I declined every single one. Not because I didn't want my story told, but because the story wasn't finished yet. I wasn't ready to become a figurehead. I was still in the trenches, still writing code, still tweaking every line of Umbra's evolving brain. But not everyone took no for an answer. One reporter, Aisha from Tech Pulse Weekly, sent me a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a DM, a letter, in cursive, on real stationery. "I don't want to talk about what they did to you," she wrote. "I want to talk about what you did next. About how you built a better system. About how you trusted your own mind when no one else did." That stopped me. I invited her in for a tour on day 125. She didn't bring a cameraman or a notepad, just her questions and quiet curiosity. She sat with our developers, observed a QA session, asked real questions about infrastructure. She wasn't interested in drama. She was interested in architecture. At the end of the day, she asked, "If you could go back, would you do it differently?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No," I said. "If they hadn't tried to erase me, I never would have built something no one else could take away." Her article published 3 days later. It wasn't a takedown. It wasn't even about revenge. It was titled, "The Architect's Code: How L. Maddox Built the System No One Could Break." The piece ended with a quote from me that she hadn't written down but somehow remembered. "Sometimes the best way to fix a broken system is to build a better one and let the old one fail." It trended for a week. On day 130, Richard Price visited our office. He walked through quietly, nodding to team members, taking it all in. At the end of the tour, he sat down across from me and said, "You know, when I invested in Syntec, I thought I was backing the next big thing. Now I realize I was backing the wrong person." "You weren't the only one who made that mistake," I said. He chuckled. "No, but I've never been more proud to be wrong." We shook hands. Not as investor and founder, but as equals. Day 131 brought a familiar name to my inbox, Caleb. No subject line, no body text. Just a forwarded article link, the Tech Pulse weekly piece by Aisha. I didn't reply. I wasn't going to offer him the satisfaction of a reaction, not to praise, not to regret. He'd made his choices, and I'd made mine. The difference was, mine were still standing. That evening, I sat alone in my office, long after the team had gone home. The city lights stretched out past the windows, reflections flickering on the glass like data streams in motion. Umbra was solid now, more than solid. We'd doubled our client base in a month. We were scaling faster than I ever dared hope. But with each milestone came a deeper silence in my chest, a hollow spot I didn't want to name. It wasn't about Caleb. Not really. It was about how much I'd sacrificed to build something permanent in a world designed to delete women like me. I'd lost friends, sleep, love, time. I'd let my hair go gray and my inbox fill with unanswered invitations. I'd watched the man I loved become a stranger in a boardroom I once thought we'd share forever. And through it all, I held the line, because I knew that the only thing worse than being underestimated was being erased, so I kept building. Day 135, we had a breach attempt, not an actual penetration. Umbra handled it within 3 seconds, but it was the first real test of the adaptive firewall protocols. A coordinated attempt from 5 international IPs, mirroring the same entry pattern that once brought Syntec to its knees. Except this time, it failed. Gracefully, silently. Umbra didn't just block the attack. It learned from it, modified its own structure, patched itself, logged every detail into our audit interface, and sent a 1-line Slack notification. Attack neutralized. No user action required. My dev team burst into spontaneous applause. I didn't join in. I just stood there in the middle of the war room, stunned, because I realized in that moment I had finally done it. I'd written a system that didn't need me to fix it. It knew how to protect itself. And maybe, just maybe, I was learning that I could too. Day 138, Sarah called. She was the last person I expected to hear from. "Hey," she said, "I know this is out of the blue." "It's not," I replied. "I figured you might call eventually." She paused, then said, "I'm sorry, Elle, for not defending you, for watching it happen and doing nothing." I let the silence hang, just long enough to make her feel it. "I get it," I said finally. "It's easier to follow the crowd when you don't think the person being buried will ever dig themselves out." "I was scared," she admitted. "Caleb, he had so much control. And Julia, she made it clear there was no room for anyone who didn't fall in line. But now that they've fallen," I said, "you want back in." "No," she said. "I want to help, that's all. I've been working freelance, doing audits. Nothing like what we built. But I miss it. I miss being part of something that mattered." "Umbra doesn't need loyalty," I said. "It needs conviction. Can you bring that?" Her voice was firm. "Yes." I hired her the next day. Day 140, we signed our biggest contract yet, a Fortune 100 healthcare provider. They'd been burned by Syntech in its final days, their infrastructure left vulnerable during a transition Julia had championed. The CEO personally reached out to me. "We need you," she said. "Not just Umbra, you." "Why me?" I asked. "Because you built something out of nothing. Twice. We don't want a system that works most of the time. We want one that knows what it's worth." That phrase stayed with me. Knows what it's worth. I used to think my worth came from what I could produce. Lines of code, clean deliverables, calm under pressure. But now, I knew better. My worth wasn't in the product. It was in the refusal to break when others expected me to. It was in walking out of a company they thought I couldn't live without, then building a better one. It was in knowing my silence was more powerful than their praise. And most of all, it was in trusting that I didn't need validation to be valuable. By day 145, Umbra had 15 clients, 0 outages, and a 99% retention rate. We launched a private education platform for schools looking to protect student data. We onboarded our first nonprofit. We offered discounted tiers for underfunded public systems. Umbra wasn't just a company. It was a shield for the overlooked, the underprepared, and the ones no one thought worth defending. And still, Caleb watched. I knew because one night, long after midnight, I saw a log ping on our public-facing demo page. A familiar IP. I traced it back. His apartment in Fremont. He'd logged in, clicked around, viewed the same dashboard he used to mock me for obsessing over. He sat there for 23 minutes and 31 seconds. Didn't fill out the contact form. Didn't try to reconnect. He just watched. Maybe he was hoping for a flaw. A vulnerability. Some tiny crack he could call out. But there were none. Because I'd built Umbra the way I wished I'd been treated. With honesty, integrity, and enough backbone to withstand betrayal. On day 150, I held our first all-hands meeting. 35 employees, all gathered in the office I once reclaimed with a sledgehammer. No stage, no dramatic speech. Just me, jeans, t-shirt, and a dry erase marker. "I'm not here to be a visionary," I told them. "I'm here to be a builder, and I hired all of you because I believe you are too." This company wasn't born out of ambition. It was born out of necessity. But now, it lives because of trust. If you ever forget why we're here, remember this. The system we protect the most is the one inside these walls. They clapped. Some cheered. Sam gave me a slow, proud nod. Sarah wiped her eyes. And I stood there, not as the woman Caleb fired, not as the engineer Julia tried to erase, but as the architect of something no one could take from me ever again. Umbra wasn't revenge. It was revolution. Day 151, we got the call. It was from a major news network. The kind with syndication across every airport lounge and corporate lobby in America. The producer's voice was polished, confident, used to getting yeses. "We're doing a tech leadership spotlight. Women in innovation. You're at the top of our list." I stared out the window at the cityscape, sunlight reflecting off glass and concrete like fragmented mirrors. She continued talking. Segments, sound bites, 15 minutes of live airtime. But all I could think about was how far I'd come from being walked out of my own company with a security escort. "No," I said. "Not interested." There was a pause on the line, like the producer wasn't sure she heard correctly. "We'd give you final approval on the cut. We want to honor your story." "That's the thing," I said. "My story isn't over, and it doesn't need to be televised to matter." She sounded disappointed but polite. "If you change your mind, the door's open." It would stay shut. Day 153, Sam brought in cupcakes, not for a birthday or a launch milestone, just because. "Team morale," he said. "We've earned a sugar high." We stood around the break room half laughing about code that had kept a multinational bank from being blackmailed the night before. There was no press release, no gloating. Just a quick toast and another line of defense added to the system. That was how we operated now. No flash, just function. Let others chase glory. We'd rather be invisible and effective. Later that day, I checked the audit logs. Umbra had autonomously adapted 4 new security layers in response to an emerging threat pattern. 4. Without a single developer prompt. It analyzed data, predicted evolution, deployed updates, and monitored success rates without breaking stride. My platform didn't just anticipate the future, it shaped it. And it was finally doing so without needing to be rescued, fixed, or defended. Just like me. Day 155, the headlines changed again. A new breach rocked the industry. A publicly traded platform that had refused our services 2 months earlier. Their infrastructure was a patchwork of borrowed code and third-party integrations, all stapled together by ego and marketing. I wasn't happy to see them suffer, but I wasn't surprised either. You can't build trust with duct tape. Their CEO stepped down within 24 hours. The board issued a public apology. Investors started whispering about Umbra being the next big thing. That afternoon, my lawyer sent me an unexpected update. Syntech's final bankruptcy paperwork had cleared. Everything was officially gone. The trademarks, the entity, the branding, the legacy, all of it dissolved. A chapter formally closed. I sat with that for a moment, reading the scanned documents like an obituary. Syntech was never supposed to be an empire. It was supposed to be home. A shared dream with the man I thought I'd spend my life with. And while Caleb had gutted it for power, I'd used its remains to build something with purpose. That was the difference. His legacy ended in ashes. Mine was still building. Day 158, I walked past our old coffee shop, the one where Caleb and I used to sit at the corner table and sketch out our future on napkins. The shop was still there, though the menu had changed. New owners, fresh paint, same corner table. I stepped inside, ordered a tea, and sat alone. I pulled a pen from my bag and grabbed a napkin. On one side, I drew the first diagram I ever designed for the original Syntech core. On the other, I wrote a new one. Leaner. Faster. Umbra's next-gen structure. I folded it once, then left it on the table under my empty cup. A time capsule. A quiet goodbye to a version of myself who had once believed love and business could be built on the same foundation. They couldn't. But resilience? That could be built anywhere. Day 160, a small miracle happened. A junior dev, Casey, caught a subtle deviation in one of Umbra's response times. Not a flaw, not even a threat. Just a slight lag, 1 millisecond off from expected behavior. She didn't ignore it. She flagged it, traced it, diagnosed a recursive loop that could have bloomed into a larger issue if left alone. When she walked me through it, her hands shook slightly, nervous I might criticize her. Instead, I smiled. You caught something before it became a problem. That's not junior work, Casey. That's leadership. Her eyes widened. I didn't want to overstep. Overstep all you want, I said. That's how the best systems are made. The next day, I gave her a promotion. Not because I wanted to set an example, but because she'd earned it. And because I remembered what it was like to be brilliant and unsure, in a room that pretended not to hear you. Day 165, I visited my mother. She still lived in the same house in Tacoma, the one with the garden that never bloomed properly and the porch swing that creaked too much. She didn't follow tech, didn't care about startups or security. But she followed me, clipped out every article, printed every photo she could find. When I stepped inside, there was a framed magazine cover on her wall. It wasn't the glossy one with my face. It was a black and white printout of an old internal memo from Syntech. L's predictive engine just saved us $3 million in potential breach cost. Someone get this woman a raise before Google steals her. Caleb, I froze when I saw it. She walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I kept it, she said, because even before things got bad, there were people who saw what you could do. I swallowed hard. He stopped seeing it. Doesn't matter, she said. You never stopped being it. We sat on the porch for hours, drinking tea, watching her tomato plants do their best in the fading sun. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to explain anything. Not the past, not the pain, not the path forward. I'd already proven everything I needed to. Day 170, the company turned 6 months old. No party, no fanfare, just an internal email from me to the team. 6 months ago, we started with nothing. No name recognition, no legacy, just code, courage, and conviction. And in that time, we've built something stronger than any platform I've ever known. Not because we're perfect, but because we learn. From every attempt, every near miss, every line of failure. Thank you for building with me. Now let's build better. At the bottom of the email, I added a small image. A phoenix. Not rising from flames, but standing, wings folded, behind a shield made of code. Umbra. Built in silence. Feared by none. Feared by none, but noticed by all. Day 171, I received a package. No return address. A small box wrapped in plain brown paper, hand-taped with precision. My name scrawled across the top in clean, neat handwriting I hadn't seen in nearly a year. Caleb. I stared at it for several minutes before slicing it open with the edge of my security badge. Inside was a single item, my old Syntech notebook. The leather-bound one I'd filled with equations, architecture sketches, ideas that never made it to code. I thought I'd lost it the day I was fired. A yellow sticky note was tucked inside the front cover. You built everything that mattered. I'm sorry I tried to take it. See, no drama, no defense, just acknowledgement. I closed the box and put it in a drawer, not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need the validation anymore. It was done. The man who once told me he couldn't imagine Syntech without me had proven exactly what it looked like without me. And it wasn't pretty. Day 175, we hit a milestone I hadn't even planned for. Umbra officially overtook Syntech's peak client count. The difference? We did it with half the staff, no advertising, and zero venture capital dependency. Just results. Our retention rate stayed at 98%. Our response times continued to shrink with every internal optimization. And our newest adaptive logic framework, the one Casey helped design, flagged a security anomaly 15 minutes before any other platform in the market even noticed it existed. Clients weren't just staying, they were referring others, not because we promised magic, but because we delivered clarity. Day 178, I visited a university. A professor I once interned for invited me to speak to his cybersecurity class. I almost said no. I didn't like the spotlight. But something told me to go. Maybe it was the thought of a room full of students who were still figuring out what kind of power they held and how to protect it. I wore jeans and a blazer, no slides, no notes, just my story. I'm not here to tell you how to code, I said. I'm here to tell you what happens when your code becomes the most valuable thing in the room, and someone else tries to claim it. A few students nodded. One or two looked visibly shaken. I saw myself in all of them. You will be underestimated, I continued. Dismissed. Talked over. Sometimes by people who claim to love you, but if you're building something real, something that works, don't let them convince you it's only valuable once they approve of it. Afterward, one of the girls came up to me. She couldn't have been older than 20. Tight curls, glasses, nervous energy radiating from her fingertips. I'm building a tool that scans medical device firmware for vulnerabilities, she said. Everyone keeps telling me it's too niche, too technical, not scalable. I smiled. Sounds like you're exactly where you need to be. Day 180, we received a request from an international humanitarian organization. They were being targeted, hacktivists trying to disrupt refugee support operations. Their system was fragile, duct-taped together with outdated tools and panicked workarounds. They couldn't afford a full commercial license. But they had the will to protect people. And that mattered more. I onboarded them personally, free of charge, because not every system needs to be profitable to be worth saving. Sometimes, doing the right thing is the return on investment. Day 182, I got coffee with Julia. I didn't plan it. We ran into each other at a startup cafe in Capitol Hill. She looked different. Hair shorter, no makeup, wearing a soft cardigan instead of her signature crimson power suits. For a moment, I wasn't sure she recognized me. Then she nodded once and gestured toward the open table next to hers. "You look well," she said, stirring her tea. "I am," I replied. "You?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Trying." That was all she said for a while. Eventually, she sighed. I was ambitious, but I crossed the line. "You didn't just cross it," I said. "You redrew it in your own image and shoved me out of the frame." She winced. "I know." We sat in silence again. It wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. "I won't forgive you," I said eventually. "But I won't ruin you either. I've already won." She looked up at me, eyes tired, but sharper than I expected. "That's what scares them, you know, that you didn't just survive, you thrived. Quietly, completely." I stood up to leave. Then maybe they should be scared. Maybe that's the new story. Day 185. I had dinner with Ryan and Casey and some of the new hires. We grilled burgers on the office rooftop patio. Something casual, something real. No suits, no speeches. Just us, laughing at bug reports that read like short horror stories. Halfway through the evening, Casey asked me something I wasn't expecting. "Do you ever think about walking away?" she asked. "Now that it's built, now that they know what you're capable of?" The others went quiet. I thought about it. Then I shook my head. "No," I said, "because I'm not building Umbra to prove a point anymore. I'm building it because it's needed, because there are still people out there writing code in the shadows, hoping someone believes in them before the wrong people take credit. Because the world still underestimates brilliance, especially when it's quiet, brown, female, or all three." She smiled. "Good. I'm not ready for you to go." "Don't worry," I said. "Neither am I." Day 190. We released Umbra version 2.0. It included a user-definable ethics protocol, code that would stop deployments if certain red flags were detected, potential for government misuse, surveillance overlaps, or civil rights violations. We were the first security platform to do it, not because someone asked for it, but because no one had. We didn't just build smart systems, we built moral ones. That night, I sat in my office alone, watching the dashboard glow with new metrics, new users, new protections lighting up across the globe. Not one piece of code had my name in it, but every line bore my fingerprint. And for the first time in a very long time, I let myself breathe. I wasn't just safe, I was sovereign. Day 191, the emails began to shift. Not just inquiries or praise. These were different. They came from women in tech, mostly junior engineers, some still in school, others hanging on to jobs at firms where they'd been silenced, sidelined, and told to smile more when presenting at team meetings. Their stories all sounded eerily familiar. Credit stolen, voices ignored, expertise questioned. Some of them didn't want jobs. They just wanted to say, "Thank you for proving we're not crazy." I read every message. I responded to every one. Because I remembered how it felt to be standing on the inside of a system you helped build, watching the doors quietly close behind you, locked from the outside. Those women didn't need a savior, they needed a mirror. Someone who had made it through the fire and was still standing on the other side. Someone who had not just survived but built a whole new world from the ashes. That was what Umbra had become. Not just a product. Not just a company, but a safe haven for people who refused to play the game the wrong way. We didn't just protect data, we protected dignity. Day 195, I finally visited the building where Syntech had once lived. I hadn't been back since I walked out that glass door with a laptop in my hand and a kill switch timer running in my pocket. The building had a new sign now, some fintech startup with flashy branding and a vague mission statement. The office we once shared. The one with the squeaky door, the terrible carpet, and the dreams that lived on whiteboards, was now occupied by strangers. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. And that, more than anything, told me I was free. I walked past without stopping, past the front desk, past the elevator, past the ghost of who I used to be. Then I turned the corner and kept walking toward the future I'd built, brick by brick, one unnoticed detail at a time. Day 200, I launched the Code Atlas initiative. It wasn't flashy, just a small page on our Umbra site with a single headline. We don't just hire talent, we grow it. The idea was simple: mentorships for underrepresented developers in cybersecurity. One-on-one, led by real engineers from our team. No unpaid internships. No empty networking events. Just mentorship that led to actual opportunity. We launched with 20 mentors. Within a week, we had 200 applications. We picked 10. We didn't choose the best resumes. We chose the people who'd been told they were too quiet, too weird, too different. Just like I had been. That same week, Richard Price invited me to speak at a private investment summit. He called personally. "You'll be in a room full of people who once bet on Caleb," he said. "Some of them still don't understand how you won." "I didn't win," I told him. "He just lost louder." He laughed. "Even so, they're ready to listen now, whether they admit it or not." I agreed, but on one condition: no introduction that included the phrase female founder. Just founder. That was enough. At the summit, I wore black, no designer label, no stilettos, just boots, a blazer, and the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. I stepped on stage and said, "I'm not going to tell you how to build the next billion-dollar company. I'm going to tell you how to build one that doesn't burn down from the inside." The room stilled. Phones dropped. Eyes locked in. "Because your problem isn't innovation," I continued. "It's erosion. You erode trust every time you reward charisma over competence. You erode brilliance every time you mistake arrogance for leadership. And you erode legacy every time you think firing the architect won't eventually collapse the building." It wasn't applause that followed. It was silence. The heavy kind. The kind that meant impact. Afterward, one of the biggest names in tech pulled me aside and said, "That was brutal." I smiled. Truth usually is. Day 210, I stood in the center of Umbra's office and watched my team. Ryan was walking Casey through a new anomaly detection logic. Sam was in the corner helping a junior dev fix a recursive query bug. Sarah was reorganizing the testing dashboard while Emma prepped our next onboarding session for NGO clients. No one noticed me. No one needed to. That was the point. I had built a system that didn't revolve around me. I had built a team that didn't require constant correction or hierarchy. I had built a company where competence was the language, not performance. I walked back into my office, shut the door, and opened a new terminal window. One final entry into my secure dev journal. Entry, day 210. I started this company with two goals. First, to prove they were wrong about me. Second, to prove I was right about myself. I've done both. Now comes the real work. Day 212. The New York Times called. They wanted to name me one of the top 10 most influential figures in cybersecurity. I declined the photo shoot. They asked if I'd at least give them a quote, so I did. They thought firing me would end the story. But they were wrong. I was the story. The article went viral. I didn't post it. I didn't need to. People knew. Day 215, I walked into a room full of potential interns, young, bright-eyed coders ready to change the world. I handed each of them a black folder with the Umbra insignia stamped in the center. No contracts, no NDAs, just a note. We won't steal your credit. We won't silence your voice. We won't let you be erased. Welcome to Umbra. Build boldly. Day 220, I finally changed my voicemail. Gone was the automated message with polite tones and corporate phrasing. In its place, "You've reached Elmatics." If this is about press, the answer is no. If this is about code, leave a message. If this is about trying to rewrite history, don't bother, I already did, and I had. Because in the end, they didn't destroy me, they revealed me. They stripped away every title, every illusion, every false alliance. And underneath, I was still standing, stronger, sharper, sovereign, because they forgot one thing. You don't fire the architect and expect the building to stand. But if you do, you better pray she doesn't know how to build something better. Thank you for listening to Elle's story. If you're yet to subscribe, please consider doing so before watching another story on the channel.